Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we have with us one of the greatest vocalists of all time. This lady has been on the scene for over 40 years and has worked with many greats from George Duke, Herbie Hancock, Freddie Hubbard, and Terry Lynn Carrington, to name a few. She is a 5-time Grammy Award-winning vocalist and a 2018 NEA Jazz Master. Please welcome to Jazz Talk, the legendary Miss Dianne Reeves. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, Dianne, like I said, you've been on the scene for quite a while. You're one of my favorite artists. And I'm interested in knowing more about your humble beginnings. I understand that you're from Detroit, Michigan, but you grew up in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, I was born in Detroit. A lot of relatives, had a lot of relatives in Detroit. And, my biggest thing with Detroit was just mostly spending in my teenage years, spending summers there. But no, I grew up right here in Denver, Colorado. And, it's funny, the first time I met Miles Davis, he said he had heard me, I was opening for him on this gig. And he taped the gig and he said, "Where are you from?" This was back in the days of Never Too Far and had percussion, and I was dancing. He didn't think I was from the country. And I said, "I'm from Denver." And he looked at me and he went, "Oh." I said, "But I was born in Detroit."
Right. Sounds like something Miles would say. But
Yeah.
One of the things that I found interesting is your background. I understand that your dad was a singer and your mother was a trumpet player.
Well, that's so funny because my mother played trumpet in a school band. She was not a trumpet player. That was not her thing. But my father, everybody says that I get my voice from him. My father died when I was very young. But everybody said he had this incredible voice. I only remember his speaking voice a little bit, but I never got a chance to hear him sing.
Yeah. So coming up, I guess growing up during that time, I guess you're honing your skills, and I guess you discovered that you could sing maybe in your teens, and you started playing piano too at that time.
Well, I was in junior high school, and like most Black families, we had a piano in the living room. And I started off taking piano lessons from my then junior high school teacher, Benny Williams. And it was at a time when we were like the first kids to be bused. It was a very interesting time. And she used the choir room as a place for, and the music as a place for the students to release. So it was a very special, kind of setup that she made. He was a young Black teacher from Texas. And so, so one time she had decided that we should put on a very big, like a school show. And she brought in poetry and just everything to make it really, really special. And I was just in the choir, and I was gonna play a couple of things with the choir, but that was basically it. And this one young woman was gonna sing Aretha Franklin's "In the Spirit in the Dark," but she knew that I could sing. So she was like, "Help me sing this song." And we were out in the hall, and I was singing "In the Spirit," and I started singing it. And they were like, "Who was that singing?" And Miss Williams ran out. She's like, "Dianne." So my piano my parents sent me to learn to play piano, but I started learning voice from her. And my first recital, I sang, and my parents were like, "What?" And I would sing around with my, because I come from a very musical family, but it wasn't like it was something that everybody thought that I was going to do. But it was then, I was about 12. It was then that I had decided this is what I want to do. And then I started to pursue it.
Yeah, beautiful. And I was reading a story where you were in high school at some type of I think convention or something, and Clark Terry spotted you or saw you sing and invited you up on stage. Wow.
Yeah, I was with the high school jazz band, and at that time there was a organization called the National Association of Jazz Educators. Then it became international, but now it's defunct. But it was a really wonderful program for students. It was the beginning of jazz education. And so the schools would have these battles within their own cities. And then whoever won, the school would pay for you to go to be a part of the NAJE. And we won that year. And I ended up going there. And that's how I met Clark. And I didn't sing with him then, but he said, I want to be in touch with you. And I was like, okay. And I gave him my phone number. And it turned out, I have an uncle Charles Burrell, who was a classical bassist. And it turns out they were in the Navy together. When I told my uncle, I said, this trumpet player man named Clark Terry keeps calling me. And, when I look back on that, kids, you give kids things, sometimes you have to keep after them to get to them.
Yeah.
And Clark's birthday is coming up on the 14th, and he saw something in me enough to continue to pursue me that, he's like, this child, let me talk to her mama, somebody, because she's just not getting it, And once I did, and I started to see who he was, my uncle was like, yeah, he's on this record, he's done this, and da-da-da-da. And I was like, wow, And then there used to be this jazz party that would happen here every year in Denver, and they would always ask Clark to perform, and Clark invited me to perform, and that was the beginning of our relationship together as a mentor and student, and he was fantastic.
What a beautiful story. Now, you went on to college. I guess you studied classical voice in college?
Yeah, I went to the University of Colorado, and they were just beginning to implement jazz program, but it wasn't very broad, and it was more focused towards instrumentalists, but vocalists could be in it and stuff. So, and in a lot of ways, that was a good thing, because you started to understand and learn the language and the curriculum. And but then I was working. After I started working with Clark, I had gigs. I was actually doing gigs, and I've been working as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
And so I had this opportunity to go out to California, and I went and talked to the dean at that time was Dr. William Fowler. He has a bunch of sons that are out there, and they were actually recording with George and stuff.
Yeah.
And we had this long talk, and he was like, I can't tell you to leave school, but, he understood what was happening. And he was saying, to me that, that there are all kinds of educational experiences out there, because then, people were doing jam sessions. You could be right there with the artist. You could study directly with people. I mean, the architects were still alive. And I ended up, three of the founding members of Earth, Wind, Fire are from Denver.
I was about to ask you about that.
I ended up going out there, and George was like so excited, and I started doing sessions with George, and eventually I decided I wanted to, do this on my own, and they had a music school there called the Dick Grove Music School, and I ended up going to Dick Grove and further my education as I went. But I always tell people that I ended up going to living schools.
Yeah.
And that was my greatest education, was being in those living schools.
Yeah. And like I said, mentioning Earth, Wind, and Fire, I mean, Maurice White, a genius, Philip Bailey, Larry Dunn. Now, was it Philip that got you the gig? How did you, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, Philip. It was Philip, Larry Dunn, and Andrew Woolfolk.
Andrew Woolfolk, yeah.
And so they were, at that time, Earth, Wind, and Fire had decided everybody was going back to their cities and developing talent of people and I didn't know Philip growing up, but I knew one of his good friends, and he's like, you got to get Dianne Reeves. And he was trying to put together a group that was kind of similar to the first Earth, Wind, Fire with Jessica Cleaves.
Right.
He always said there should be a female voice. And I realized that a group setting wasn't for me. And with his blessing, I went on and started to pursue my dreams.
Yeah. Now tell me about Caldera. Wow. When I first heard you, because, we'll talk about your debut on Blue Note, but when I first heard that Sky Islands, I'm like, so this is Larry Dunn. You could hear his influence all in it. But how did you get involved with that group? I mean, did Larry just say, hey, Dianne, why don't you just come and sing?
Larry thought I could sing any and everything. He
Ah,
was like my champion. He just believed. So he was like, oh, and they wanted Flora Purim, but she wasn't available.
ah,
And so he said, no, I have the perfect person. And that music was very foreign to me in terms of performance, but when I went in there, it just felt like I was at home. And I loved the whole concept of the group. And then out of that, I met a dear friend, Eduardo Del Barrio, who is a
oh,
musician
yeah.
from Argentina. And so, I always felt like I was always looking for Africa, but I went through South America to get to Africa in my music. And that was the beginning, and that just opened up a whole new world for me.
Yeah, you mentioned Eddie as a Del Barrio. He was very influential with Earth, Wind, and Fire. He actually helped Maurice
Yeah,
write
he wrote
Fantasy.
fantasy.
You can hear
Yeah.
his influence on that. But
Right.
you also hooked up and you worked with Billy Childs, great pianist, composer, and you guys formed what, Night Flight? This group.
Yeah.
Tell me
Billy
about
had heard me on that record and was looking for me. And Patrice Rushen, I had just met her, and I was like, I'm looking for somebody I can, learn, I could take piano lessons from.
right.
And she's like, I have the perfect person. She said, you should call Billy Childs. And so she gave me his number, and I called him, and I was like, hey, my name is Dianne Reeves. He's like, I've been looking for you. And we just hooked up. I never took piano lessons from him, but we just hooked up and we started playing together, and eventually ended up having the group Night Flight. And we
Mm,
used to play at this club called the Come Back In out at the beach.
yeah,
And it was really, really cool because there was another place called and Freddie and Billy was working with Freddie Hubbard at the time.
yeah.
And eventually, I started working with Sergio Mendes. And so we go out on the road, come back, and all the stuff that we got from those experiences would end up being in our music. And it was an exciting time because when I look back on it, we were so fearless and so bold and so clear, and just having the, joy of our, only thing we wanted to do was make sure we had gas in our car and we could pay rent. And then we were cool after that. We could find food anywhere.
And you were working with some heavy hitters early on. I mean, you worked with Stanley Turrentine, you
Because of
know,
Larry.
Lenny
Mhm.
White,
Yeah.
a lot of big names. And I know in the early 80s, I think you toured with Harry Belafonte too, didn't you?
Yeah. In 83, Harry had decided that he wanted to feature somebody who was African American because he had had so many other people, Ledum Bulu, of course, the great Miriam Makeba, and all kinds of people. And so I met with him. I had actually at that time I had hooked up with Phil Moore, who ended up, he was like one of my greatest mentors and teachers. And I used to go to a workshop that he would have, and I was a part of that. And it just all came together, and word of mouth. It was actually better than social media.
Tell me about
But
it.
I ended up auditioning for him, and he said, okay. He brought me to New York, which, blew my mind. And it was interesting because he had a band that was made up of people from all over the world.
Hmm.
And he said, I was like, well, what about arrangements? He said, well, we're going to pick the songs that you want to do. And he had a list of things that would fit his format, which were really wonderful
Yeah.
because at that time, I had come out of this group that was more fusion oriented, and it was all about reaching and moving forward, and it was complex rhythms and harmonies, and I was using my voice more like an instrument. But when I got with him, it was when I discovered that words were really, really important. And so in our setting of arranging the music, basically they were arrangements that we would come together as a group and put them together right there on the spot. And I
Hmm.
love that kind of thing because then everybody's personality, everybody's, approach was very much a part of the music. And I discovered a lot of really great music working with Harry. He was very generous.
Yeah. Diane, pivotal year, 1987, you knocked the door down. That debut album that you came up with to this day, and I'm not joking, is one of the greatest debuts for any artist. I still listen to it, and I'm like, this lady sounds like a veteran. I mean, it was almost like introducing Dianne Reeves, and you were so sleek looking on that cover, sitting in that black dress. And you just came out, you and Larry came out with that Sky Island, that version, which was incredible. But every song on your debut album is incredible. I think my two personal favorites are Chan's song. I think what Herbie and Stevie wrote that, right?
Right. And
And
they both, yeah. Stevie wrote the lyrics for me to sing because it was always a vocalese before that. And then he wrote those lyrics for me to sing. And it was really interesting because, okay, so I got to LA in like 1977.
yeah.
And so George was like, and I did 2 records before George ever produced my record. And my whole thing with him was, I was like, look, I know you're my cousin, but you George Duke, you know, and he was like, I'll produce. I was like, I know, but I want to have my stuff together for when we come together. So
Mm.
fast forward 10 years later, that's when, you know, he and I got together and, you know, were able to, you know, to work. And it was really wonderful because I had heard about um, Bruce Lundvall, and
Mm.
the word had it that, you know, Miles really dug Bruce, and he was a musician. He loved musicians. He loved the music, and he understood, you know, people developing their voices and all of that kind of stuff. And so I finally, at one time in 85, I tried to get with him and he didn't show up, but 87, I had a plan. I said, look, you need me. I want to be on your label. And he heard me. And right after the performance that he heard me at, he said, we got a deal. We started working on the record before we even had the deal finished.
Oh my gosh. And Dianne, in addition to Chan's song, Harvest Time is probably my personal favorite. I mean, the way you sing
Oh,
that, it's like it almost like it just puts you in a trance. It's like, wow. And you know, another thing that was so incredible about that recording is that maybe I would say probably your best known song ever is Better Days. And it's so
yeah.
funny, people
That
who
was
don't
the
remember the
second time
title.
I recorded it.
Really? It's funny because people who don't remember the title of this isn't that Dianne Reeves, the jazz singer, the grandmom song?
Yeah, they
You know,
call it
that's
the
what
grandma song.
now is that are you singing about your grandmother in that tune? What is that all
Yeah,
about?
well, I'd written it with another writer, and it was about my grandmother and his mother.
Yeah.
And but it was also about the sentiment of that. I grew up in a multi-generational family,
Hmm.
and that is a rich experience, you know, listening to their music. Then my sister was 10 years older, listening to hers, my mother's, my father's. It was just a lot of music in the house. And for a lot of people, music wasn't just to listen to, but it was actually their livelihood.
Hmm.
And so, you know, that was really, really, really special. So Better Days is, you know, kind of like, is like, we look at that matriarchal figure as, you know, the one that all wisdom and light and love and stuff comes from. And so that's basically what that song was about. And it was about my mom too, you know,
Yeah.
because all of it was like that. Yeah.
And like I said, you had so many heavy hitters. I mean, to come out with a debut album as like Tony Williams, Herbie Hancock, George
Right.
Duke, Stanley Clark. I'm like, wow, she's got everybody on this thing. And it's still to this day holds up. It's like one of the best recordings that I've ever heard, a debut recording from an artist. And you were on
Yeah.
point. But one of the things that I've always loved also about you are your live performances. I mean, you're always just incredible. And I've seen you so many times over the years. I wanted to talk to you also about the honorary doctorates that you've received, one from Berkeley and the other
Mhm.
for Juilliard. I mean, what was that like receiving that?
It's extraordinary because it gave, you know, power to my life experience. You know, I felt like I was honored for the things that I learned in the doing of the music. And it was, and you know, both Berkeley and Juilliard are places that are, you know, really turn out amazing people. And so I was very honored to receive both of those doctorates. It was really wonderful.
Yeah, and I think I was reading, I think you're the only female jazz singer to receive like 3 consecutive, I think, Grammys or something like that in a row, because you have 5, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know, that's a heck of an accomplishment. But like I said, everything that you touch, I mean, every time I hear you, I says, Dianne just sounds so incredible. You're like this humble lady, but when you hit that stage, bam, you know, it just comes out, you know. And I
Yeah,
talked
that's
to
my this I tell people this is my playground, you know, and we come here to play, but it's also my sacred space because it's a place without inhibition and, you know, doubt. It is devoid of all of those things. It's just, I feel like I'm on a whole nother charge. I always, when I'm talking to students, I say, you know, it's a funny thing. I can have on some high heel shoes that are slightly tight, you know, like I don't even know if I'm gonna make it through. And once I walk through that veil to walk on stage, everything
yeah,
is gone, and I just
exactly.
feel light. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you're so powerful. Also, in 2018, I was so happy when you had the when you got the NAA, became an NAA Jazz Master, and I think it was Joanne Brackeen, Pat Metheny, and someone else along with you too. But that was fantastic, you receiving that. And as a matter of fact, I was at the Kennedy Center. I think it was at the Kennedy Center when you guys
Yes, it
received
was.
that. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Now I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you about this thing that you're doing, Find Your Voice, this 18 part series thing where you're teaching
Mhm.
people or artists rather how to find their voice. Tell me about that.
Well, the thing is, what I like to the my biggest thing with I'm sorry, my dog is
Oh,
out
it's
there.
okay.
Cool. The biggest thing that I love about this music is, and what I discovered is that your instrument is one thing, and you should develop it to the best ability, you know.
Mhm.
But your voice is something else, and your voice has actually further reach than your instrument because you get to create your own narrative. You get to speak specifically about what it is that you do, how you do it, and you can implement it in different ways. And so I try to, and your voice is unique. Everybody's life experience is unique. And so what I really try to get people to do is to get in touch with that it's important to listen to ideas and other people, but the most important thing is to develop your authentic self, and
Mhm.
that comes from your voice. And so that's like the major thing. And I tell them, then you refine, define, and you respect it because it is unique into the world. You know, that's the greatest miracle, you know, in the world, that everybody is different, you know. And so you want that to come out because, you know, I remember when I always tell the story that the first time I heard very early on Billie Holiday, I just didn't get it. I didn't like, because I was into the instrument and Sarah was like, could do all of these different things. And it wasn't until, you know, I moved out of the house, I was on my own, that Billy became my friend. You know, I was like,
Mm.
oh, the nuance, you know, the ability to weave a story, to bring people into you and all of this. And that's when I knew that it was about voice. So I really, my whole thing is, you know, to teach people to start there first. And when you start there, you'll find your unique way of phrasing things, because
Mm.
the unique way that you speak or have conversation, or how you develop when you're talking to someone. And so it's all of those kind of things that we deal with.
Yeah, yeah. Would you say, Dianne, that she's your biggest influence, Billie Holiday,
You know,
or
I
one of
no,
them?
yeah, one of them,
Okay.
because from all of them, one of the things, you know, they were around, a lot of them were all around at the same time, you know.
Mhm.
And you know, I loved them all because they were all unique. And that was the greatest lesson that they taught me. I mean, from note one, you knew it was Sarah or Carmen or Betty or Billy. You know, you just, you know, when you heard them sing the first two notes, you knew who you were listening to, you
Mhm.
know, by Ella, you know, especially, you know. And so you know, from them, I learned that it was important for me to find my own stuff. I wore their shoes for the very early in my career a lot. And then I realized I gotta, develop my own thing. And so, I pulled from their principles more than, than their sound.
Mm. Now, I was going to ask you, Dianne, when you're home, just relaxing, taking it easy, what are you listening to? What is Dianne Reeves checking out? Are you listening to a little bit of something old, something new, or I'm just curious what you're listening to?
Well, it's interesting. During this COVID time, I have just started going back to listening to music because I hadn't heard silence in such a long time.
Yeah.
And so, to turn off everything and to really be able to listen to some and read and all of that, that um, has been like the biggest thing. But, I love that a lot of my friends are putting out music now, and so, I'm like, I'll put them on and listen to, and really be an active listener and hear what it is that they're saying in their music. So it's a lot of stuff. I love, of course, Cecile McLaurin Savant. I love Jasmine Horn. My
Mm.
dearest friend Terry's record is just
Oh, yeah.
feeds my soul. There's just Maria Schneider's takes me to a whole nother place. And then I just posted just recently, I was cooking. And generally when we have our first snow, that's when I put on Here's to Life, because I put the fireplace on, just close it down. All the weather and stuff is happening out there. And I just start cooking and listening to her and Sarah and, just everybody.
When I look at like the greats, you just talked about Ella, Billy, Sarah. I look
Mhm.
at people like yourself and Dee Dee in that class, and some of the younger people stand on your shoulders because of the work, the amount of work that you've put out, and it's just tremendous. Like people like Liz Wright, she stands on your shoulders, and it just continues that tradition. Now, something else I was going to ask you: is there anyone that you've wanted to work with, Dianne, that you've never had the opportunity, because you played with just about everybody, but is there an artist maybe that's still living that you'd say, you know what, I'd like to do something with that person, in the future?
Maybe, like somebody like Bobby McFerrin, because he's so, expansive. Um,
Mm,
we've done things on stage together, but nothing together. And it could be really, really wonderful. Or maybe, I'm just really open. A lot of young people ask me to do their records. As a matter of fact, the Baylor Project, I'm getting ready to do something for them. And, so I'm really open because I love exploring in other people's vocabulary and, experience of the music, because every time I leave out of that situation, I find something about myself. I find more about myself. And, you realize that your your treasures are endless, and collaboration is a lot of fun. So I'm just open.
sounds good. Just going to
Mhm.
ask you, what are some of your hobbies when you're home? You talked about cooking. Any other things that you like to do when you're not doing music?
Well, I love to cook. That's a big thing, and
Are
it's
you are
funny.
you a, are you a good cook?
I think so. I think I'm a really
Oh,
good cook.
okay,
And
okay.
since this, I've been like cooking stuff and sending out, meals to friends or whatever. It's like I cook this because it's always, I don't cook a whole lot, but I can cook for 100 folks.
Oh, wow.
But that's like where, I'll get up early in the morning, like 3, 4 in the morning, because I need to be focused and quiet, and that's when I, do my best work. But I love to do that. I'm reading, and I love to Denver's a really beautiful place, and we're having, of course, odd weather just like everybody else, and it feels more like March here than it does,
Yeah.
winter. I mean, it's going to be 60 degrees today, which is very odd.
What? Wow.
We really haven't had that much snow. But I like to get out and breathe the air, and there's a lot of distancing, so I find myself, all the stuff, that I didn't do, like get rid of stuff and, purge and all that kind of stuff I've been doing this whole time, and listening to music of Brazil, and, just, being using, now that I don't have an itinerary, because I'm used to being on an itinerary. As a matter of fact, I called my tour manager and said, send me an itinerary at the beginning of this. But now I realize that when I get up, just get up. If I go to bed at 8, it's cool because I got up at 3. I'm just letting the time do what it's supposed to do, and just getting myself ready to get back out there again.
And we look forward to seeing you. As I said, a place that I would love to see you perform is in Baltimore at Keystone Corner. Todd Barkin.
Yeah, I
He's
just
got
love all the concerts that are happening
oh,
there.
he just had Free to Pain there. Dee Dee's coming in
Yeah.
March, and
Uh-huh.
that'd be a great place for you to perform. I'm sure it would sell out
Yeah.
done, because
Yeah.
that or the Kennedy Center. Those are probably two of the best
Yeah.
places to go. But listen, I wanted to thank you so much for being on Jazz Talk. You're a class act. Enjoyed spending this time with you, and please continue to make the beautiful music that you've been making, because like I said, still to this day, that debut album, it's right here. I love it. It's my favorite. So
Well, I just want to say to all the people, I'm looking forward to being with you again. Just mask up so that we can fill these rooms, because it's
yes,
a hard thing to see all of these rooms empty. And it's a hard thing to see all of these artists who want to fill those rooms, so we have to come back together again, and be good to yourself. Happy holidays to everybody, and, stay lifted.
beautiful, beautiful. Hang on, I'm about to close out the show.
Okay.
You've heard it from the great Dianne Reeves. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk, signing off. Peace.